Welcome back to the No Ordinary Cloth podcast, where we stitch together a rich tapestry of textile innovations, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Millie Tharakin, a textile innovator and researcher. And in this podcast, I give you a glimpse into the future, shedding light on innovations bubbling up at the intersection of textiles, emerging technology, craft, and sustainability. This is a special episode created in partnership with Fashion District London, a dynamic hub for fashion innovation in East London, supporting startups with innovation networks, affordable spaces, business guidance, and investment opportunities. What if we could trace every thread of a garment from the cotton field to the shop floor and all the way to the recycling centers and understand the true cost of making it? Not just the financial cost, but the environmental, social, and human cost. That's the question at the heart of today's episode. The fashion supply chain is one of the most complex systems in the world, and for decades it has operated largely in the dark. But a new generation of technology companies are changing that, gathering data, building transparency, and helping brands finally understand what is actually happening behind their labels. Today, I'm joined by two wonderful guests. Jothi Kanayala, head of business at Clothing Connected, a platform that digitizes fashion supply chain and brings compliance, ESG, and product data into one place. And Kanayala Guj, co-founder and chief product officer of Made to Flow, a platform that measures the environmental impact of textile products at a scale that simply wasn't possible before. Together, they present two big pieces of the textile supply chain puzzle. And this conversation is about why supply chain visibility and traceability matters right now more than ever, and how brands and suppliers can start to prepare for upcoming regulations, such as eco-design for sustainable product regulation and digital product passports, and where the industry really needs to go next. Whether your work is in fashion, technology, sustainability, or simply you're someone who cares about where your clothes come from and where it's going, you're going to learn a lot from our guests today. So let's pop over and say hi to them. Welcome, Jothi and Kanayala. It's wonderful to have you both here. I have been really excited about this conversation because your work really sits right at the intersection of fashion, technology, and impact. And that's exactly where so many of the big questions of our industry are right now. The supply chain is well hidden behind this black curtain, as far as I'm concerned. It's murky, it's fragmented, it's global and complex, and consumers never see it. And brands who work within the supply chain often have very little visibility into it themselves. That's why I feel this is such an important conversation and a fascinating topic to discuss today, where we get to pull back that curtain a little bit on the fashion supply chain, acknowledge the mess that is there, and also explore how you're gathering, organizing, and making sense of a huge amount of that fragmented data from multiple sources along the supply chain. And it feels like a big, huge mountain to climb, but clearly you've both made it to the top of that mountain where you have this fabulous overview of the supply chain of various brands. So I'm curious to understand what that view is like for you both. And I'm also just looking forward to unpacking what your platform does and how it can transform the fashion sector. So thank you both for taking the time to share your experience and insight with us today. To begin with, I would love to invite you both to briefly introduce yourself, your company, and your role. So let's start with Jothi. Tell me about yourself, Jothi.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting us on this platform, Millie. So I'm Jothi. I am head of business at Clothing Connected. We belong to a company called Foods Connected. We've been digitizing food supply chains for the longest time. And we started digitizing clothing supply chains around 3 years ago. We are a SaaS platform. We are a SaaS partner helping brands and retailers power their products with digital supply chain data. I've been in this industry for more than 15 years. I started off in design and product development. I worked directly with supply chain across Bangladesh and India and South Asia for fast fashion brands. And when I started my work, I was working in Bangladesh, and the Rana Plaza incident happened, and that completely shattered my belief system as to how this industry worked. What we were consuming was not ethically produced. I soon started learning how the supply chain works, and after a few years, I decided to shift to use all of this knowledge And for the last couple of years, I've been working with innovators. I joined Fashion for Good, and then I worked with Hugo Boss. So it's been a lot of scaling and implementing newer technologies to create impact in the industry, which brought me to Clothing Connected. And I've been working with them for the last few years to really digitize supply chains and create transparency and traceability in the supply chain.
Great. We'll get into a bit more of what all of those words mean as well. How about you, Atnael? Tell us a bit about yourself and your company Made to Flow.
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Atniel. I've been working in the industry a bit more than 20 years now. I'm a merchandiser by profession. That means I think in numbers. I worked first in luxury, and then I moved to mass market, and then I decided I need to be closer to the supply chain. So I went to work for Italian fabric manufacturers, and that was not enough. So I went to manage production lines in China, in Zhejiang province. And it's funny, Jothi, that you mentioned also Rana Plaza, because I remember it very well. It happened a week after my wedding, and that was a shock, I think, to all of us. So as well, that was very similar at the time where thoughts about how things could be different started affecting, I think, many of us. And I started getting more and more into different sustainability initiatives. The first LCA life cycle assessment that I did was in 2014. It took 6 months, and everyone said, that's amazing. Today at Made to Flow, we do literally thousands per day, a little bit different. And that eventually led to, together with my other co-founder, Tal Shogol, that we founded Made to Flow almost 6 years ago as a decarbonization platform. So at the time we went to tell companies and they thought we're crazy. We told them one day you'll measure the impact of all your products. Today, there is a regulation that's about to come out, the DPP, the Digital Product Passport. So we're not entirely crazy anymore. And our job is mostly about looking at supply chain either from a product-led product perspective, reverse engineering and understanding exactly what happened to do an LCA, understand the impact hotspots, or from a supply chain perspective of measuring the facilities themselves and helping them either ourselves or with our many partners to decarbonize, build the action plans, follow through, and eventually make sure that the brands or the suppliers themselves, because a lot of our clients, for example, are suppliers, can reduce the impact over time.
Jothi, what specific problem or failure in today's fashion supply chain are you trying to solve with Clothing Connected? And why is it so important for brands to address these now rather than later? I mean, I guess the regulations are almost here now, so they can't really wait for too long, but why do they need to get on board right now?
The problem that we're trying to solve is really managing the entire supply chain, understanding every tier that has participated in creating your product. Now, as a consumer, when you buy a t-shirt, you see a label, it says made in India or made in Bangladesh. That's just the garment manufacturer. That's where the garment was cut, made, and produced. But there are so many other tiers, so many other suppliers in this value chain who we have no visibility to, not just the consumer, but also the brand or the retailer. So by not having visibility to this product that may have actually traveled 40,000 or 80,000 miles, we completely lose transparency to two-thirds of the impact. And we know that Scope 3 emissions actually come from raw materials and textile processes. So we don't know who our spinners are, who our knitters and weavers are, where our raw material sources, where it's coming from. And by losing all of this, we are also not able to understand what has gone into our product, what has gone into our material. And we will never be able to understand the impact that it creates in terms of environment, if it's a health hazard for humans, if this garment has been ethically produced. And then at the end of life of the garment, you also don't know what to do with this garment because you have absolutely no understanding of what has gone into the material. So you don't know how to recycle it, how to sort it, how to best prepare it. We need it now more than ever because one, digitizing your entire supply chain can help you make sure that your suppliers are compliant. For example, you can make sure that your garment does not have PFAS. And the only way to make sure is to know what your wet processors are using in this process. And also just to optimize your supply chains. Now, every time a brand goes to a manufacturer, it's all about cost. At the end of the day, they want to buy garments which cost the least. although there are labor wages and costs in place, it still comes down to where can I buy the cheapest? And this will avoid a lot of such issues. And then when it comes to materials, I may be using the same material that another department is using. If I have a few departments, menswear, women's wear, kids wear, I'm able to optimize and say, look at the entire material pool and say, this is a material that the other department is using. Can I use the same? So you're able to optimize your supply chains. You get a lot of return on investment, and you're able to tap into the impact by looking at what materials you're using and how you can actually use better materials instead. That's on the point of supply chain. And of course, there are regulations that are coming in place. Like you said, there is digital product passports that's coming in for ESPR, that's coming in soon for textiles in 2027, which requires the brands to show where their materials have produced, the origin, but also the impacts that is creating environmentally, socially. There's ethical producer responsibility, the taxes that are coming in that are already in place in EU. So every garment that is being sold, brand will have to pay taxes on the garment that is being sold and also on the packaging, because now it's the onus of the producer to take care of what happens after the garment is being sold, after the end of life of the garment. So they are essentially paying for recycling, sorting of these garments. To understand all of that, you first have to digitize your supply chain. You have to bring them all onto one platform and see data in real time. Only when you collate this data in real time, integrate with other partners, layer this data with someone like a Made2Flow who can give impact values, you'll be able to see what is the impact that you're creating, what are the materials that you're using, what is the product that you're providing to your customers. Can you improve the quality, the durability? Can you bring in circularity and closed loop solutions? Yeah, all of the above.
Okay, wow, that's a lot of reasons you've just given us. Atniel, what key problems in the supply chain is Made2Flow focusing on solving, and why do you believe that it's really critical for the industry's future, really, for us to fix this problem?
It's. I think that Jothi said a lot of the things that we think exactly the same way. At the end of the day, it's all about primary data. If I look back at my career, when I started, is exactly pretty much around the time where we favored less understanding and less data for speed. And that was the name of the game. And speed is very much the name of the game. That never changed. It just got even more. But we're at a different point of the cycle where without the data, without that control and understanding, there's not going to be any progress. We're stuck. So we got to the bottom line of not knowing anything. We understand now the consequence of not knowing about our supply chains, right? Because around 20 something years ago, we understood, we can just send an email to someone on the other side of the world and we'll get a product and everything will be fine. And we have all the infrastructure to do it and get a sample and fix it and so on. And I almost don't need to know anything. And it's fast-moving consumer goods, not just fashion or textiles, yeah? And now it's different because we are facing, obviously, regulation. We're facing the need to be more responsible towards our clients. It's not just, I want to do good in the world, but rather we have completely lost trust, I think, with our clientele, with consumers, and we need to get it back. And it's also financial because the prices of energy, of water, of a lot of things that we transition our production to certain places because they were deregulated and prices were very low. That's it. We got to the bottom line. There is not that magic factory that 15, 20 years ago we were looking, I'll find that factory that does half the price. They don't exist anymore. That's it. Bottom line, we got it. So now it's different. Now we need to know what's going on. We're going to an area of control, of understanding. And with that, obviously, our main point of view is decarbonization, reduction of impact in general. I said decarbonization a lot, but it's a lot of different environmental impacts. Can be chemistry related, can be water related, and so on. But it's the reduction of the impact across the supply chain by analyzing the data that we're all talking about, right? And it's linked to financials. Those that will not do it, those that are afraid to spend the money now on the infrastructure will wake up one day and their FOBs are through the roof and they never knew what happened and what hit them. So now is the time to work with your supply chain towards it. It's not a fight towards who offers me a better deal, but how do I work more steadily with my supply chain, understand what's going on, and work with them for a better product, better everything.
So before we go in deeper, I just want to get a few jargon out of the way so that listeners know and understand what we mean by certain terminology. And something we hear a lot is visibility and traceability. It just seems to be this umbrella term for many things to happen. So can you both very briefly explain what, and maybe Jothi, you can talk about visibility, what that means, and Atniel, if you take traceability, what does that mean along the different tiers of the fashion chain? And also from your experience, now that you started collecting data, where are the common big data gaps that you're seeing along the supply chain? Where's the data missing or difficult to find? Atniel?
Traceability is the action of discovering who did what. That's the easiest way. So we all know BOM, bill of material, right? If we're in the industry, most of us don't entirely know BOP, bill of processes. So who did which process? Traditionally, and that's very much linked back if we talk Rana Plaza and all of that, traditionally, it's understanding a chain of custody. I made a garment, so I bought a fabric and trims, and someone made a fabric and they bought yarns and so on, the very traditional cut and sew kind of route, right? But that's vertical. Imagine a line that goes vertically back to upstream, back to the cotton field, for example, right? Or multiple fields and so on. And we have also horizontal. So especially in the multi-tiered production that is textile, you often have different facilities doing different actions. So in the fabric level, for example, you have one facility that might do knitting or weaving, another one that might do dyeing, and another one that might do other wet processing, right? Traceability is the ability to discover and prove who did all these actions and basically disclose it.
And Jothi, what about visibility?
It's understanding who your tiers are and what your value chain looks like. Now, brands have visibility to tier 4, which is the garment manufacturer. We say we have 4 tiers in the garment industry. Now, the third tier is the fabric mill. They are the weavers, the knitters, also the dyers, the wet processors, and the dry processors. Some of the brands and retailers have visibility to tier 3 as well, because sometimes they nominate which fabric needs to go into which garment or who is the producer that you should be working with. They have tie-ups with mills. So there is visibility to tier 4 because they're obviously directly dealing with the garment manufacturer. And then there's the tier 3 because maybe there's a nominated mill they are working with. Now, beyond that, tier 2 is the spinner and the ginner, the spinner who has actually spun the yarn and passed on this yarn to the fabric mill to either weave or knit your fabric. And then the ginner who has collected all the raw materials from the farm collective or from the different farms to make bales of this fiber to have passed on to the spinner. Now, there is absolutely no visibility or touch with tier 2. And the most difficult data to collect is tier 2 to tier 1. Because imagine this one bale, for example, of cotton may have come from 5 different farms. Now, there are organizations like Better Cotton that, again, have this chain of custody, mass balance. They have this chain of custody model where they collect cotton from different farms, different farmer collectors, and they certify that this is a Better Cotton, or God certifies that this is GOTS through their certifications. So there is hardly any visibility to where actually your raw material is coming from, unless there are bigger brands who use physical tracers. They use fluorescent inks or some sort of a DNA, generative DNA manipulation where they can trace this product at the end. In general, beyond tier 3, tier 2 and tier 1 visibility is quite less. It's diminished. Also, you have to consider the digital literacy. Because we are working with developing nations and underdeveloped nations that have abundant resources that harvest a lot of these raw materials, they often are not, you cannot really bring them on to a digital platform. So while we completely help with product backward traceability, we give them visibility up from tier 1 to tier 3. What a platform is able to do is we've been able to onboard at least these 3 tiers up to tier 3. And now brands have complete visibility and they are able to map their entire supply chain for every single product, for every single material that goes into the product, using the bill of materials, using the other tools that we have on the system.
Thank you. Now we're going to focus a little bit on Clothing Connected itself and the platform and services that you provide. So, Jothi, when you talk about digitizing the supply chain, what does that actually look like day to day for a brand and its supplier using Clothing Connected? What do they need to do?
So one big chunk is supplier management and compliance of the suppliers. So what the tier 1 suppliers do is they invite their tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers to be onboarded. As soon as these tier 2 and 3 suppliers are onboarded, we know what their business activities and sub activities are. So we know if they are a wet processor, if they are into dyeing, laundry, the compliance rules are automatically triggered on our system. And it's a very automated task-based system. So as soon as they are onboarded, they get a set of documents that they are asked for, questionnaires to fill, there are audits that take place. So that completely takes care of managing the supply chain and their compliance. And then the other bit is product data. So what we do is when a brand onboards all of these suppliers, they essentially communicate with tier 1 suppliers, and all the communication is on the system and everything is task-based. So as soon as a brand, say, sends an order to a tier 1 supplier, a garment manufacturer, they get it as a task on their dashboard saying, you have been sent this order and there's a data request form attached to this order. The form automatically fetches the entire supply chain information from the bill of materials. Depending on what materials and what fabric has gone into this product, they verify if this is the correct supply chain. If not, they declare the supply chain that went into creating this product. And then what we do by collating all of this data, tier level product data, is that we create BI reports. We create a lot of different dashboards that give them visibility to their sustainability metrics in terms of what are the materials they've used across the period or across the quarter, half yearly. They're able to filter down and see where they are in terms of their targets. If they have a target of, say, I want to hit recycled cotton to 75% in 2 years, they're able to see where they stand in terms of, am I at 35% right now? What am I sourcing the most? Who are my top 10 suppliers? How can I really optimize the supply chain? How can I use alternate materials or preferred materials that will improve circularity? And we also do a lot of API integrations. So we integrate with their internal PLMs. We also integrate with external platforms like Made2Flow, which can add value to the data that we are already collecting by fetching, say, impact or fetching. We are integrated with Intertech, so we collect all the lab data. So they have visibility to durability and quality of their garments. Where is it that they're going wrong the most? Where is it that the tests are failing the most in terms of the materials? So there's a lot of room for improvisation of products and optimization of the supply chain, reduction of impacts. So that's what we do on our platform.
It really surprises me every time how brands have been sort of flying blind for decades. It's suddenly now they're starting to see where they've been heading. So from what I gather, you sort of help brands kind of bring together a single source of truth for their supply chain data, right? And you use sort of emails and spreadsheets, and
we replace all of them. There are no emails, there are no spreadsheets, everything's real-time data. Yeah.
You kind of bring all of that into one place, and it's just much easier for them to look through and understand. I think you've mentioned the different types of data that you collect. How does your platform handle data quality and verification to make sure that information is complete and trustworthy?
That's a really good question. So once a supplier submits a certain documents or questionnaires, it's validated either by tier 1 or by the brand or the retailer themselves. Although we've removed a lot of manual work and digitized it, still there's a little bit of validation and verification that needs doing by the brand itself. But this is very quickly changing with AI in place right now. We are looking into AI to completely validate the documents, automatically validate the documents that come onto our platform. And we are also looking at integrations. We've already built a few, like Intertech I named. We've We're looking at other integrations like the ZEHC and the HIG, which automate the SEDEX. We are integrated with SEDEX on our other platform called Foods Connected. We are automating data verification as much as possible through integrations and with the use of AI.
And at a technical level, what is most innovative about Clothing Connected model and how it, models the supply chain across the different tiers?
I think one big thing I have to credit our system for is that it's multilingual. In the Foods Connected platform, have 70,000 suppliers who are using our system, our platform across countries across the world. Around 3,000 now on the clothing platform. We are a cloud software company. We are essentially a cryptographic ledger, very similar to a blockchain, but we are less energy intensive in comparison to a blockchain. And I think those are some of the benefits. The other thing that's great about the platform is the user interface, because our suppliers are so used to using spreadsheets, documents, emails. We've tried creating a platform which gives a very similar look and feel, but it's just that you're doing it online. So it's a lot of tables, a lot of filters. Once you sign into the system, it's very intuitive on how you can use the platform and how one tool leads automatically to another. And like I mentioned earlier, we are completely automated in terms of tasks, and our system is very agile. So one brand may have requirements of a certain due diligence requirements that other brands may not. It may vary. And even the audits they do, the questions they ask may vary from one brand to another. So we have a template-based system where when we onboard a brand, we do a current state analysis of where they are at. We try understanding what their essential needs are. And we then create specific templates for them that only their suppliers would have visibility to, and that only they would be using, and no other brand would be able to use the same. So it's very agile in a way that the system works the same way for every brand and for every supplier. But what the information that you see, that you are asked for, the rules that are set up are very different according to the needs of the brands and the retailers themselves.
Brilliant. Now, coming to Made to Flow, Atniel, how is your platform different? What kind of data are you collecting and what kind of dashboards are you creating, which is different?
Our job is to complete data. I think we didn't understand what we were getting ourselves into when we started, in the sense that, honestly speaking, looking back, and we have conversation with people over the years, and they said that you guys are just don't understand the trouble that you're getting into. And in a way, I'm very happy, but it took a couple of years to get to where we are, where we said, okay, the industry doesn't have enough data. So Connected needs certain data, and we can complete it in order to understand the environmental data. So we are feeding off on product data and then what we call activity data. To illustrate a point, there is zero need to understand if a product had a silicone finish or the type of dyeing that was necessary to be able to bring a good product to the market, right? It's nice to know this, but you don't have to do it to have a good product that will sell well. So this is exactly our job to do it. And then we need to also understand what's the energy footprint, so energy bills, the machines that was used, and so on. So we are what we call an off-system data gathering. Basically, we can present things on a platform or send it to Connected, for example, right? The results. But the entire data gathering methodology is about wherever the supplier is, whatever their language, whatever is their preference, and so on, an email, a WeChat, or WhatsApp, all these kind of things, they can get a link with the data that is missing and we'll complete it. And our job is to be those facilitators, those that will make it easier, right? And if there's something that I take with me from my career when I was managing production lines, was that my team could change all the time. Someone would be offered just a little bit extra and then move to the facility next door and so on. And that happens all the time. So we cannot have these expensive trainings and all these kind of things. So our job is to take unstructured data, unstructured activity data that will help us with environmental calculations eventually, to be able to get it a few inches further of accuracy so that we really understand where the impact is.
Could you tell me a little bit more about activity data? What kind of data is that? What goes into it?
So activity data is, for example, think about your electricity bill. How much coal are you using? What kind of wastewater stream do you have? If you have an ETP, so basically internally a facility that will help you recycle or refilter, reuse some water, what is it? There's like 32 different subtypes and so on, and their energy consumption and their ability to do the work and how much they filter and bring back the water all differ. This is what generally is referred to as activity data. On top of that, you have the very specifics, jet dyeing, or to that effect, you have, tens of different types of machines, and they have their own specifications and so on. So all of this is the type of data that we feed off from, with the key understanding that you never have all the data possible. It's a puzzle. You keep building puzzles and you'll never finish all of them. And you need to be able to complete them in a reliable manner. So you learn from every situation to be able to complete the puzzle so that you don't stop because you work on a deadline, you need the information on time and so on. And so you keep bettering and rebuilding these puzzles along the way.
So do you actually have people on the ground at these factories sort of ensuring there's, what machine people are using? Or how do you gain that information? How do you make sure that it is true?
That would be dramatically expensive. To do something like that, physically impossible. Or there were times that we will often ask, do you put meters on machine? So, for example, there are areas in the world where I see more and more metering appearing. Portugal, very advanced. Pakistan, Bangladesh is now starting. Vietnam, I see it more and more because these are new facilities with a lot of money coming in. So there's more metering data that is coming in and is very helpful. But no, the vast majority of the industry have no meters, sending people all across the world and so on. And we've done data collection for more than 53 countries. That would be dramatically complex and almost physically and economically impossible. So what we did is basically try to understand over the years what data is available, right? And so you can ask for energy bill, but you cannot necessarily know the exact energy consumption that was on a specific lot in the specific sub-process in that specific production, right? So you need to understand that, for example, a type of exhaust dyeing with, let's say, a beam machine with acid dyes, for example, could be 21 kilowatt hours per kilo. For example, the entire pre-process and the process itself, the pre-treatment and the dyeing itself. Whereas other situations would be only 3.8 kilowatt hours, right? So it's taking incredible amounts of data, computing and cross-referencing all sorts of data together to be able to calculate it as accurately as possible. And as you can imagine, the more data you put into a system, the smarter it can become and the more and more accurate.
When you both talk about so much data, it almost hurts my head. I'm glad, it's not a human sitting and crunching all this information. Once you have collected and cleaned the data, how do you translate that into impact results or scenario modeling that brands can then actually use to change suppliers or processes or materials?
So I think this is one of the things that we managed to figure out quite early, because I know there's a few of us out there in the market that managed to do, and I'm very, very proud of the LCA engine that we built that is really specialized in fast-moving consumer goods in general, but really, really in textile. And so the ability to understand the many forks in the road that you have. So if you have that kind of gauge, if you have that kind of knitting, if you have that kind of weaving, if you have this kind of product, so many nuances that let you understand what is normally happening. And that helps us, one, guide the questions that we ask to uncover, get that primary data. And second, be able to, if there is any gaps and so on, to complete them correctly, right? And so today you can have the entire road roadmap of everything, what we would call, so as I say, the build process, all the processes, the impact from it. And in LCA, lifecycle assessment terminology, the complete inventory table. So every line of calculation. Obviously, an inventory table is impossible to consume when you do a 1,000 or 10,000 products, or even just a couple of hundreds, because it's way too much information. But you have the ability to go and visit very, very nuanced data when you need to, whenever you need to go and try and understand and go deep into something. At the same time, you can have the different levels of reporting, of aggregating and seeing the big picture. And I think this is the game between when do you need to go really deep and when do you need just, okay, give me the bottom line, where is my problem so I can start taking care of it.
Yeah. Now we'll go into more general questions for both of you. What are some of the barriers of entries that you've seen for brands? Jothi, you mentioned about these kind of technologies being used in the food industry for a long time, and it's well adopted. But what is slowing down the adoption of these technologies in the fashion sector?
I think the fashion industry is a very fragmented industry. We've been discussing supply chain for such a long time. The supply chain does not exist in one country or not even in two countries. It's across so many continents. I wouldn't even say countries. So for the longest time, like Atinel mentioned before, brands only worried about where they could get their garments produced. Everything else was not their problem. And everything else was not their issue because they were sitting so far away from the supply chain. They did not really want to bother about who is the fabric supplier, who is the dyer, or where's the raw material coming from. But like you said, there are so many regulations that are being put in place right now. I strongly believe that these legislations are driving the industry, and this change in having to manage their entire supply chain and having to understand, be transparent and traceable. And this change, we see it as a sudden change, but it hasn't happened all of a sudden. It has happened gradually over the years. It is surfacing now more as a change because we have more and more conversations about it, because there's a strict deadline to this regulation that is in place. So there's more visibility to what is being done. I think the biggest barrier is brands, at least the smaller and the medium brands, the growing brands, they only look at return on investment. They look at their profit margins. Every department, every team of merchandisers who are looking at certain products or looking at a department, they are given KPIs they're given targets, they're given goals, and those goals are always numbers. And those goals had never been impact numbers until now. They've always been sales numbers. And when the conversation has always been about profit, brands have been hesitant in investing not just into digital, into a digital platform, but also into new generation materials, into recycled materials, into anything that may increase their cost by a certain percentage. And that's been a huge topic for these brands and retailers until now. But they're finally seeing that when they're able to digitize their supply chain, when they're actually able to see their data in real time, they're able to utilize this data, and the return on investment in this is huge. They're able to reduce their impacts. They're able to create public reports. They're able to be answerable to authorities who ask them where their fibers coming from. If their cotton's from China, is it from Xinjiang? Can you prove that it's from Xinjiang? So they're seeing a lot of benefits right now than ever. But definitely there are regulations. These are regulations that are completely leading the way into digitization and into accepting alternate materials, creating newer pilots with these technologies, with newer innovations in textile.
So I can see how this could be benefiting brands, and they kind of have to follow these regulations. What's the barrier of entry for suppliers at Niel, and why should they care? Why is it important for them? Because it feels like it's all to help the brands. And I guess suppliers are there to serve the brand, but it feels like a lot of effort for them. What do they get out of it?
First of all, some doomsday words. We are facing, in my opinion, a great extinction of suppliers. A lot of the supply chain will disappear in the coming few years. It's not economical. It cannot work. It's not adjusted to the current business models and so on. The name of the game was very simple in the last 20, 25 years. Everyone were slaves to the planogram. You didn't produce according to what you sold. You produced to how much you fill in a store. You had insane amounts of square footage that you needed to fill out. And so you just check in products one after the other, and the sales will take care of it and you'll manage. That business model is gone or is dying, however you want to look at it on the timeline. Things are changing dramatically. Consumers behave differently, how they deal with their products, and so on. So today, if you think about it, when production got to a lot of the places where production is today, right, is because of deregulation. There was no regulation. And regulation is, if you want, utilities, energy, water, and so on, because in a lot of places, and it's not a question of global north, global south, or however you want to call it. Also in the global north, there's a lot of places where water is deregulated and the pricing doesn't reflect what it should be and so on. But you have utility, you have the overheads, the cost of the personnel, and you have the cost of the commodities, the cotton, the viscose, the whatever you're buying and so on. All these costs are going up. That's it. It's a fact. They're going up. They're going to go up faster and faster. And if you don't have control, if you don't have visibility, if you're not going to take care of your efficiency, if you're not going to make sure that tomorrow you can supply your own energy, you're going to get stuck. Look at Bangladesh when they increased prices, what was it, 2 years ago? After 5 years of lock, they increased prices of the natural gas, what it meant for the bottom line of a lot of factories. That is happening, of how the energy market in Pakistan has basically collapsed, and how the rise of biomass and so on, which only those that were smart enough, that were capable, that could foresee the future. And that's across the board, every country on earth, wherever you produce, everything's going to change. If you're not going to have control, if you're not going to take care of your efficiencies, forget for the good of the earth, forget for your community. Yeah, simply economics. That's it. If you're not going to do it for the economics, you're not going to survive tomorrow. It's as simple as that. So yes, the brands are saying, I have goals, so now you have goals, and they're very aggressive, and you're going to foot up the bill, and you're going to pay for it, and so on, to a certain extent. Yes, but this is not just being, yes, correct. It's still a bit the power struggle of who has the power and who says what. But if suppliers will not take the initiative right now, then I don't know if they survive 2030.
You both mentioned how important the regulation has been in driving these technologies and the adoption of these technologies. These are, mainly EU regulations that are coming out for products that are coming into the EU. And correct me if I'm wrong, but garments are still being manufactured for other parts of the world. And for a lot of other parts of the world, these kinds of data points and information doesn't seem to matter as much. Or do they? I don't know. You can tell me about that.
So let me jump in on that. They do. So first of all, we're a global market. So if you're going to behave, you cannot deny that the EU market is one of the most important markets out there. So whether it is only 10%, 20%, or 90% of my sales, it's massive. And if I'm going to have an entire system adjustments just for that market, it means that I'm going to anyway do it for the other markets. So it's amazing. We have clients in Canada, in Australia. On purpose, I'm saying countries that are quite far away, right? That they are like, we need a DPP. And we tell them, you are aware you don't have such a regulation. But it doesn't matter, because their competitors that compete there in that geography are behaving the same way that they do in Europe. So that's it. It's a global regulation. Plus, it's not the only regulations. There are stricter regulations, some of them very strict in China, in India, in a lot of other regions. So it's an entirely global thing. I know that we look very much at the US, and we would expect them to be more ahead of the game than what they are, and without getting into politics or anything like that. It doesn't matter. It's a global market. So if a region like EU is leading, it's not always leading in all the regulations. There's other places that have very strict regulations, EPRs and other things. That's it. It's the entire market behaves like this.
That's really encouraging to hear. Okay, so if we had a sort of mid-sized clothing brand listening in right now who feels quite overwhelmed by all this data collection and regulation, What is the first, maybe pragmatic step you would tell them to take tomorrow to get on the right path with supply chain data and impact management? Jothi?
So we work with medium enterprise brands as well. And I know that brands that even make a turnover of 20, 25 to 40 million pounds a year, they also have to declare their modern slavery. According to the Modern Slavery Act, they have to declare the supply chain. They have to put out a public report on sustainability. And it can be overwhelming because all of a sudden, there may be a brand that is suddenly growing and they have to do all these things that they were never meant to do. I think the easiest stage would be, or step would be, to first map out their entire tier 4 and their tier 3. So go stage by stage, tier by tier. And when they would use a platform like ours, it would make it very simple. They have to first list out everything that they are missing. Is it supply chain compliance that is their focus? Is it product traceability that they are most worried about? Or is it their country of origin of their raw material sources they want to understand most? Is it the impact that is their prime focus for the next 3 or 5 years? Once they understand which bucket is it that they're first trying to tackle, they completely focus on going tier by tier, with or without the platform. They will slowly get at a point where they'll understand, almost like a to-do list. If I have to tackle supply chain compliance, these are the due diligence steps that I have to put in place. I have maybe 6 of them in place. I don't have the other 4. How can I bring them in? If I want product visibility by tier, do I know who my fabric source is? Do I have a bill of materials in place? Does my bill of materials have only fabric, or do I also have trims, packaging, finishes? So trying to expand the data collection step by step, stage by stage, depending on what their priorities are. I think that would hugely help. And that is our approach as well. When we start working with a brand, we do a current state analysis as to where they are at the minute. What is the data that they've already collected? Where are they struggling? And then we do a future state analysis of this is where you could be and this is what your supply chain could look like in the next 3 years or 4 years. You will have visibility to data you did not have visibility to earlier. Your impact values may go up because we have case studies that have proven so with other brands. We also utilize the learnings that we've got from by working with these other customers and by working with a supply chain that is very similar in a parallel industry that is foods, where we work with 130 brands. So what we do is essentially bring in that knowledge and collaborate with them, have a partnership with them to understand that we would be a platform that they will use and they will work on. We also onboard all of the suppliers for free of charge. We train all of the suppliers. We do a lot of hand-holding. We do a lot of implementation when we begin. So the first step is really for them to understand what they need. The second step is, of course, to digitize if they have the means and the resources to.
Brilliant. Anything to add there, Atnia?
Yeah, I think SMEs have a huge opportunities right now because everyone are looking at the regulations and not sure. And, there's regulation at the same time. There's a certain deregulation of the regulation at the EU level. Yeah, that's happening both at the same time. Right now, the game is a game of big companies, not of smaller companies. But this is where things can change, where the bigger brands are still on the fence and they're not sure and they're being very careful because there's bigger implications simply from being of a larger scale. And as a smaller entity, you have the opportunity with the different techs that are being offered, of all of us on the call today. Suddenly they could do a leapfrog and really not just better their business, being more efficient, which is necessary and so on, but to have the ability to communicate that with their consumers and gain trust faster than the big guys out there. I think that's a massive, massive opportunity that those that leverage on it will dramatically benefit in the coming years.
Very encouraging bit of news there for all the mid-sized companies which might be feeling overwhelmed. I think nothing works like a good example also to convince people of the potential of platforms like yours. So can you tell us an example where the data from your system led a brand to change a product, a material, or supplier, and what difference that made to their impact or business performance?
Wow, I can give a few examples. I can it's something that stuck into mind. It's very, very particular, but there was a certain pouch that was done that is used for vehicles, whatever. And the impact was roughly 2.5 kilos CO2 per product. They produce 850,000 of these per year. And that could have been reduced to just under 1 kilo. So you can do the math. It's insane numbers, right? That's just on a product level. And on a supply chain level, it is incredible because we on supply chain level, you don't measure in kilos anymore. You measure in tons of CO2, right? These are slower processes, but once they happen, they're repeated over and over. And it's the difference in cubic meters of water, in tons CO2 can suddenly be massive, not to mention that also financially and the relationships between the brands and the suppliers became so much stronger because they were forced to have a discussion. So you take that one T-shirt that the dyeing changed, or the consumption of material was different, or there was a certain reuse of things. These are tiny examples. But the real story, in my opinion, it leads to much better relationships. And these were relationships that were, I have a product I want to do. Here's a BOM, send me a sample. Whoever sends me the best sample and the best pricing wins. And suddenly it's an entirely different conversation. But for that, by the way, everyone needs to understand their role. The supplier needs to understand they're also a supplier of data. They're a service provider, not just goods provider. The brand needs to understand that it should nurture relationships. And so it's an entire ecosystem of benefits.
I love that. How about you, Jothi? An example from your platform?
Yeah, of course, I can't name the brands or the suppliers, but I can give an example of a retailer that's been using, of course, all the retailers, they have these top 5 or top 10 suppliers who they give their core quantities to, and they're the biggest in volume. So one of the sourcing hubs that was supplying to this brand, they reported after 1 year that they improved their compliance by 40%. And 40% in this industry is in 1 year is a big number. And also what this other retailer did was a few materials, they did not understand where those materials were coming from. They were non-conformant materials, specifically non-conformant man-made cellulosic fiber that they were not supposed to source, which it's a material that's not allowed, not approved by the Canopy Green button. They were completely able to trace down where that material came from, which product that material went into, which season that product was at, and completely changed or helped the supplier change their tier mapping for the repeat products for the next season. So there've been a lot of such improvements. And also this retailer was, along with a lot of other retailers in the UK, they were scrutinized or asked where certain products that they put out in the market came from because it had the label made in China. When it says made in China, immediately everyone's thought goes on, has there been forced labor involved in producing raw materials for this garment? This was the only retailer that was able to go back with complete breakdown of data of where every single product came from, all the tiers that were involved in the product, the location, the country of origin, and they were able to confirm that it was not from an area that involved forced labor. And no other retailers were able to give back a proof or a validation of having made in China and this product not containing the material that came from forced labor.
Great examples. Now, zooming out a little bit, what's one conversation the fashion or textile industry desperately needs to have, but it isn't? What would you want people to be talking about? Kanayala?
There's so many, really. But
just one today.
Just one today. I think we are having finally, after many years, the right conversations, right? Think about it. Things like catalyzers, like No Logo of Naomi Klein came out, 1997? And here we are today talking about traceability and so on in a more organized kind of manner. So the conversation is there. I think it's the scale of the conversation. So today we having the right conversation. We understand impact and traceability and understanding and data and digitizing all of this. Exactly the conversation to have. But how much of it are we doing? And there's a tendency to go in just a little bit, just do this, just this section. No, that's it. The conversation should be about how tomorrow everything is on it, how everything is connected, how we know about everything. This is it. It's about understanding that technology is mature enough that the scale should be there. There is no reason that in 10 years, we are not dramatically more advanced than the phase 3 of the DPP, which basically gets you to tier 3 and so on. Yeah. And we need to understand now is the time that I'm going to connect everything, and I'm going to have that demand to understand the impact and who did what and have those deeper conversation, and not just with a select few.
Great. How about you, Jothi?
I think the conversations are there. I want to challenge the people who are involved in these conversations. I don't think we have still reached the right people who have to be involved in these conversations. Of course, we have the head of sustainabilities and the head of sourcing and all these people individually and as teams sitting in the industry who are deeply passionate to really create this change and improve the products that we're selling, have a big impact. But the ones who actually need convincing, the CEOs and the CFOs and the people who put the money to scale these technologies are not in the conversation. And I think that's the challenge that we need to put out there. How can we reach and convince them, make them believe that this is something that's coming fast in terms of regulations, but also in terms of them having the onus of responsibility in what they're putting out in the market, what they're selling to their customers, and how ethically they're producing the garment.
Now we're going to zoom out even further and get you to take off your work hats and just come as yourself and tell us a bit about, where you're from, where did you grow up, what's your background? Othniel?
Sure. So as I used to apologize to my university teachers, I'm French Israeli, which means I'm very direct. I used to tell them, I'm very sorry. I did not mean it to come off wrong. It's two cultures together that creates people that tend to be quite direct. It's a problem. I'm working on that. But yes, so I was born in France and I grew up in Israel. And I was very, very, very fortunate in the industry to have really be part of this and see everywhere, from being involved in retail in the UK, which is a very particular ecosystem and so on, to seeing fabric manufacturers in Italy, to experiencing it firsthand in China in the production lines, and finally understanding everything. And I think, or for example, experiencing, understanding the people that my job was to go and get a cent less from them, and now being partners together to reduce the impact together. I think from that perspective, especially when asking when, where from, and all of that in our industry, which is very global, it's something that feel very fortunate that I'm part of and can keep seeing things from very different perspectives.
Absolutely. I love that. And while I did a little bit of research on you, I realized that you speak a whole number of languages. So, Hebrew, French, that explains, that's your background. Italian, Dutch, and a bit of Chinese. I mean, have you always had a love for languages? Is it self-taught? How do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you that I failed German in university. Okay. And Made to Flow is a German company, so it's a huge problem that I say this. The issue was that I was doing my bachelor degree and I had to learn Dutch and German at the same time. That wasn't mixed very well. You can do either which. You cannot do both at the same time. Very bad idea. I love languages, really. I think that there's something incredible about it. I'll tell you something personal. So my wife is Chinese. So I told my daughter now that she's turning 6 soon, that we're going to start learning the characters and everything.
Oh, lovely.
And I told her, I'm with you. We're going to do the characters together. So let's see who gets it better, because I can understand pretty well, but the characters not so much. So now in the coming few years, I have a new goal. Let's see if she gets it before me.
Yeah. Nice. That's wonderful. It's such a skill to be able to learn languages. I really envy that. Now, Jothi, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I'm half Indian, half Pakistani. I was born and brought up in India, south of India, Chennai. I actually was a software engineer in my previous life. I started off as a software engineer. I was there in that field for 2 years. I was quite bored of being in front of laptops and just coding. And I'm generally a more creative person. And I really used to like art and fashion. In my second year, I took part in this is a funny story. I took part in this reality show. It was called Let's Design, which was like the Project Runway of India. And I ended up winning, being the winner of this reality show.
Wow.
And I told myself, okay, I'm going to apply to all the best design universities in India. And even if I get through one of them, it's a sign I should be a designer. I shouldn't be like in front of the laptops coding. I got through all of them and I was like, okay, these are multiple signs. And that's how my transition to fashion happened. And I soon after moved to Bangladesh, and yeah, my world completely changed after being in Bangladesh. I've seen everything, the Rana Plaza incident, the strikes that used to happen during the elections. I also lost a colleague to a terrorist attack that happened in one of the resto bars, very close, actually 200 meters from my house. Bangladesh has seen some really challenging times politically. Yeah, I think that has completely shaped the way I see the industry, the way I view the world. Now I live in London. I've been here for the last 6-7 years. I moved here to do a dual master's and I've been here ever since. And it's been really nice to see brands, retailers, see the industry finally get warmed up to making these changes and to creating a change. Yeah. And in my part-time, I paint. I do a lot of art. Yeah, these are exciting things I do on the side.
It's interesting because you seem to sort of exist between two extremes. So, I mean, if anyone knows the politics, India, Pakistan is just, they're extremes, but you've sort of lived in the middle and grown up in India. And then you did software and then you went into fashion and you won in a competition where you didn't even have any training in fashion, but you kind of went from one extreme to the other. And now in your job, you're sort of bringing the two together again. Which is wonderful. That's quite a story. I was curious now, running a startup and setting up a business is highly stressful and you're wearing multiple hats and pulling your hair out and all of that. How do you take care of your sort of physical and mental health in the process of all of it? Or do you?
This is a conversation that we have all the time internally. It's very difficult. It's on the verge of impossible. You work in all sorts of crazy hours, and there's always a feeling that you need to compromise on something. And so, I honestly, if you can find an answer on how to do it properly, I would love to know. We really, I know with Tal, my co-founder, our CEO, we talk about it a lot and try to see how we do, but it's never really enough. When you have a startup, it just consumes everything, and you have great responsibilities for everyone in the company, for your clients, for what you're doing. You keep asking yourself questions. It's a never ending kind of thing. But also at the same time, it's not something that was thrust upon the people that do it. We chose it. So I have only one person to blame. That's it. It's a bit late. It's just trying to figure out how we do all of these things together. Sometimes managing more than others, sometimes less.
Jothi, how about yourself? You said you do a bit of painting. That sounds good and healthy. Anything else?
Yes, I actually have. I'm I have some really good co-founders, and the global VP I report to, Duncan, they're very supportive, they're completely involved in how Clothing Connected works, and we sit on strategy meetings together and decide, we create a roadmap of how the future should look like and how we can really help the industry in building their supply chain. So on the work front, it's quite sorted thanks to people above me who are doing the work and giving me the support that I need. But I still do wear multiple hats. It's me and another colleague of mine, Dan. We are two people who handle everything in Clothing Connected, from product innovation to implementation to client support to bringing new clients to marketing. So it does get a lot, but I look at how I can derive satisfaction from many different things and not just from my job. So I start my day every single day, Monday to Friday. I start my day with a workout, either with a strength training or a yoga. And that's already one thing done in my bucket list for the day. So I already go in with so much endorphins and with full energy, with a lot of dopamine. I make my breakfast. I have my breakfast with my partner in the morning. And then the entire day obviously is dedicated to work. And in the evenings, I paint. I've been painting a lot more because the show is coming up. I sit opposite a beautiful green park. So I'm actually very thankful of all the things and grateful of all the things that I have in my life. So it sort of automatically reduces the stress that I have at work. Also, thanks to my friends and my partners. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Gosh, I feel like Athniel and I can both learn a lot from that. I need to do a lot of that, actually. And thanks for reminding us that that's important and it's possible.
I had off and the painting, which is not exactly something that squeeze in 15 minutes. It's not this tiny thing. It's a whole activity on its own.
We just need to learn how to do it, right? I don't know. She's got extra hours in the day that we don't. So last couple of questions, guys. Hang in there with me. I appreciate your patience. This is maybe dipping into a personal story. So I believe textiles have the power to fulfill our senses and our soul. It's very intimate. Could each of you share about a piece of fabric or a garment that holds deep personal value for you and a story that's connected to it? So it doesn't have to be something that you can still use or wear or, but it's still, you hold on to it because it's very, very special.
Wow, it's endless. I can talk about hours, but in the sense, if it is a Momotaro denim that I have that I don't fit into anymore and will never will, and I still hold on to it because just touching that rough selvage denim or so on, or a cardigan from when I used to work at Pringle of Scotland, and it brings up these memories and also the make of it and so on. So it's for me, textile, and especially the touching of the fabric, is immediate bringing memories and thinking of different periods of time or different things. And for years, I used to go to Première Vision, and essentially what you do is it's an attack on your senses to touch all these fabrics. And I tried to estimate once that if you do the 2-3 days in certain times, you can see like thousands of designs, and it's like you cannot even comprehend this. But the all of this, I think that's why, with all the difficulties of this crazy industry, that's what makes it also wonderful, because it's so connected to the emotions.
Absolutely. Jothi?
That's it. You hit the nail. I think it's the emotional connection, the emotional bond that we build with some of the things that we own, especially textiles, because they touch our skin. They're on us the entire day for how many amount of times we wear. I can't name just a single piece of garment or cloth that I'm super attached to, but I do remember my mom, it's passed down from generations, has this one black sari that is completely hand sequined with black sequins and hand embroidered. Wow. It's such a beautiful sari. I think it's definitely older than me. I think it's around 45 or 47 years old. My aunts have worn it, my sister, me, my mom. Yeah. I don't think I would ever be able to get rid of it. And I don't know what I'll do with it. Like, it has to pass on from legacy to legacy. A lot of Indian textiles, at least handlooms and hand embroidered, have that special emotional connection for me.
The last one for the day. If you could start over, what would you do differently, or what would you tell your younger self at Niel?
Wow, that's a very difficult question.
Deep.
I don't think I necessarily think of doing something different. I can now have perspective and understand, but I would say that what I've really learned, and especially in the last couple of years, is really understanding how it works in the relationship of brand supplier, and really understanding how to maintain these relationships. And now, like, for example, with Made to Flow, that we're the in between. We don't necessarily always hold that relationship directly, but we connect these relationships and make them deeper. I think understanding of how the focus on the relationship rather than that next t-shirt, that next shirt that needs to be on the market and I need to have the sell-through and the margins and so on, I think that could have really helped do things better.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Jothi?
I think I would tell my younger self to just take more risks. From a very young age, have took on a lot of responsibilities for myself, for my folks, for my family, my extended family, and my decisions. A lot of my decisions were driven based on, okay, am I still able to provide everybody, make sure that everyone's fine, and there was very little. I was averse to risks. I wouldn't take risks. So I think I would tell my younger self, everything's going to be fine. Just take some risks and live your life.
Well, maybe you didn't realize it because you did. Taking a risk jumping from software to fashion is massive, especially in a country like India where, oh my goodness, the dream job is to be a software engineer. Maybe you've taken risks and you just haven't realized that you have. Thank you so much. And Atniel, I love to close on this note because it is all about the people and the relationships. And I think work settings and factories and brands and all of that is just, I always believe they're just stages, areas, or performance spaces where we get to build relationship. Because at the end of the day, it is all about the people that we work with and what we can do together and how we can change things because we collaborate and build those deep relationships that go beyond just the business and the product, as you mentioned. Thank you so much, both of you. I absolutely love that conversation. Really appreciate the generous insights that you've given us into the fashion sector, and also just the hopeful message of how things can change and platforms such as yours are making a difference. It's fascinating really to pull that curtain back on the supply chain with you today and see not only how complex and messy it can be, but also how much possibility there is when the right data is gathered, organized, and made useful for people. It's also great to see how your platform complements each other as well and work together, making it frictionless for brands and suppliers to get that bigger picture from the top of the mountain and also the granular data when they need it. So I really appreciate the clarity you brought to us on the topic and the honesty in sharing both the challenges as well as the opportunities. I know the listeners will go away with a much better understanding of where the industry is heading and the role your work plays in that journey. So thank you for joining me.
Had a lovely conversation. Thank you so much as well, Millie.
Thank you very much.
Wow, what an eye-opening conversation. I hope that gave you a much clearer picture of what it actually takes to bring the fashion supply chain into the light. Two things really jumped out for me. First, that a garment's label tells us almost nothing. 2/3 of a product's environmental impact lies in the invisible upstream tiers that most brands have never had visibility into. And secondly, Atniel's point that the industry has spent decades optimizing for speed and cost at the expense of knowledge, and we've now hit the rock bottom of that road. The only way forward is data, transparency, and collaborating closely with your supply chain rather than working around them and finding cheaper options. With regulations like Digital Product Passport and ESPR arriving fast, the brands that build their data infrastructure now will be the ones best placed for what comes next. There is a lot of activity and discussions and regulations that are being developed at the moment around these topics of DPP and ESPR, especially in the EU, as you might be familiar. So this is something that I will definitely keep a close eye on, and maybe get another guest who can go a bit more in depth, especially into the digital product passport when there is more clarity in that space. So do subscribe to the podcast so you can find out when that episode drops. Please share this episode with anyone who might find it inspiring or valuable. Your support to spread the word about the podcast is deeply appreciated. If you enjoyed this episode, consider buying me a coffee using the link in the show notes. It helps fuel those late night editing sessions as I bring you these stories. A review from you would mean the world to me and help other listeners find this podcast. Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned for more episodes, and don't forget to subscribe for more conversations at the intersection of textiles, technology, craft, and sustainability. Until next time, I'm Millie Tharakin, reminding you that there's no such thing as ordinary cloth. Every thread tells a story.